Klatt with us from out in California. Do people out there realize there's a championship game in California?
No, I mean, people out here don't realize anything until it rains, and then they're like, it's crazy, don't drive. No, I mean, there's certainly some excitement, and I've noticed over the last few days, even all the way down here. I live down in Newport, which is about an hour south of Los Angeles. Tons of groups of Georgia fans, TCU fans. So there's certainly some energy even all the way down here, and I know people are fired up for tonight.
You know, we were trying to figure out a bigger underdog that's ever, or Cinderella, however you want to put it, that has won a national championship in the past, and it's really hard to put a finger on something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was going through this exercise and thinking of some of even just like teams that were unranked to begin the year that were competing, you know, in this stage. Obviously, like that Auburn team that played for a national championship against Florida State in Gus's first year. That was his first year, right? I'm almost certain. You know, that team, I guess you could say, kind of came out of nowhere. You'd have to go back to, I believe, Georgia Tech was the last team to start unranked and then win a national championship. And albeit that was split and changed because of one coach's vote, they won one poll in a split championship with Colorado in 1990. And then back in the 80s, I think BYU, you know, winning there. But again, in modern college football, this is totally unprecedented. Even to be here playing in the game, much less like, can you imagine the shockwaves that it would send through college football in this day and age? In a day and age in which we all, including myself, have been talking about a lack of parity. It would blow my mind if TCU were to actually pull this off tonight.
Joel Klatt from the OC with us as we talk about TCU and Georgia tonight in the national championship game. What has to go right for TCU? And sometimes they won games, I thought, this year when there was chaos in the games. So maybe everything not going right for everybody helps TCU. But what has to happen tonight for TCU to win the game?
Well, everything has to go right. Similar to that game against Michigan. Remember, like, they play Michigan 10 times. They're going to lose 7 or 8 of those. You know, think of all the things that had to happen for them to win a one-score game in that Fiesta Bowl. And I would say that even a little bit more has to go right to beat a team like Georgia. They're going to have to steal possessions somehow, whether that's a crazy onside kick, a la the Saints coming out of halftime against the Colts, or even Saban who threw out that onside kick in a championship game. I believe it was over Clemson. You know, they're going to have to steal a possession. They're going to have to gain turnovers, all the old adages, right? But then you start looking at, okay, what's the game plan? Well, they have to be able to control the run game of Georgia. It has to be a one-dimensional offense for Georgia. Now, they've been able to stop the run in the back half of the year pretty good, and they did a really good job against Michigan in particular after that first long run that Donovan Edwards had. TCU gave up, at least when you just looked at the running back statistics in that Fiesta Bowl, after the long run from Donovan Edwards, the running backs, Khalil Mullings and Edwards himself, averaged about 3 yards per carry. So they did a nice job, but they're going to have to do the exact same thing to Georgia and at least force the game into a one-dimensional type of game for the Georgia offense. That's imperative. They're going to have to create some chaos and pressure on Bennett and hope that he plays as poorly as he did, even in a statistically great game, but as poorly as he did against Ohio State. Because I still chuckle. It's like the guy statistically, you look at his numbers, man, it's like, man, he played great. And right after the game, Kirby's like, our quarterback's got to play better. We just asked him to do one thing, play within the system. I was like, man, Kirby is a hard driver. They've got to do that. Then on the other side, and this is where this is more important. They have to have a giant day out of Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver. I've been talking about it with you guys for a long time. There's only one path to really beating Georgia, and that's when your wide receiver goes bonkers or your passing game goes bonkers. And so Quentin Johnston's going to have to play fantastic. He's going to have to win 50-50 matchups down the field. They're going to have to create explosive plays. part of that is in order to get the ball down the field, you've got to protect your passer a little bit. Well, how do you do that? Twofold. One is you've got to be able to run the ball a little bit. You're never going to run it great against Georgia, but you've got to at least be able to run it a little bit. And you saw that in particular in the second and third quarter from Ohio State. They were able to just pop a few runs here and there, and that slows down the rush. Then the other part of it is when you do get some pressure, and Georgia will present some pressure, just ask Tennessee. I think they had like 9 sacks in that game. Duggan's got to be great with his feet. So he's going to have to escape and then run for a few first downs. And when I say a few, I'm talking about probably more than 4. I'm saying 5 or more first downs with Duggan's feet is the recipe. So it's got to go perfect for TCU. Is there an avenue? Probably, 1.5 times out of 10 that they could pull this off. And we'll see if tonight's one of those 10.
Joel Klatt, presented by MyBookie, MyBookie.ag, code next round to get that deposit bonus. You can use it right away at MyBookie.ag, code next round. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. It's funny you mentioned Duggan rushing for first downs because I wanted to ask you, his last 2 games, he had 15 attempts in both games, season highs for him. I mean, would you like to see that number? Does he need that number again tonight where he's running for – and it's not just the attempts. It's attempts for positive yardage. 110 against Kansas State in the loss and then 57 against Michigan in the win.
Yeah, and it's to me, it's a great question. Yes, his attempts are going to need to be up there. Now, whether those are called or in the zone read game or in the RPO game or just a scramble, like they're going to get up to that point. And it's less about the overall yardage for me and more about, are you sustaining drives? So it's about moving the chains when he does run on a third down. Can you extend a drive? And so whether he runs for 50 yards or 100 yards is to me a little bit, unimportant as much as it is how many times are you sustaining the drive and moving the chains. I thought that's what Stroud did a pretty good job of when you really looked at that matchup and watched that matchup in particular late in the game. And it's the one thing, like if you're gonna say to me, like, what is the one thing that Georgia, can struggle with? I would say, well, like they can struggle with a great wide receiver. Q might be the number 1 wide receiver pick in the draft, Quentin Johnston. And they can at times lose the quarterback when the quarterback wants to run. And Stroud was a great example of that. They ran 2-man in that last snap that Stroud took off before they kind of stopped him and forced a field goal. But they'll do that. They'll throw that out there. And if Max Duggan sees cover 2-man, 2 safeties back, man coverage underneath, there's no quarterback player, and he can exploit that. So they'll throw that out there. They try to remain safe in coverage, and Duggan's going to have to be a huge runner in this game for them to stay close.
Is it possible to make an argument Stetson Bennett could be the better quarterback in this matchup?
Yes, I do think that's absolutely an argument you can make, in particular in big games, right? When you look at their matchups against top 15, top 10, top 5 opponents, his last 5 or 6 have been remarkable from a statistical standpoint. Now, there is a little bit of he was statistically great against Ohio State, but I don't think any of us would say that he played great in the game, right? I think in the fourth quarter, he was tremendous. And that's what both of these guys do, is that they generally play their best football late. Duggan was behind in several games. Stetson was not behind in several games, but when he's needed to play well, he has. In particular, late against Ohio State. I think you can say he's the more accomplished player. But it's interesting. Is he the better player? Let's just put it this way. Outside of hardcore Georgia fans, if you were on the playground and Duggan and Stetson Bennett were in front of you, who would you pick?
Duggan.
I would too.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that kind of answers your question.
I don't want to go Hoosiers on you, but SoFi Stadium is probably the best stadium facility in America. Maybe even the world. There will be some debate there, but in America, SoFi. So, Georgia's played in these national championship venues. I would imagine TCU playing in the semifinal helps a little bit, but is there nerves being on this stage tonight, you think? And do you have to manage that? How do you settle into the game if you're one of these coaches it is a different venue. It's LA, it's SoFi Stadium. It's just different.
I I've thought a lot about this actually. Like, is TCU going to play with the freedom that a 13.5 point dog should have, or are they going to play with the tightness of feeling like they're in a place where they don't belong? And I know that sounds harsh, and that's, hyperbolic, but I'm just trying to like paint a picture, right? And I think we're going to see that pretty early. I will tell you, like, they didn't flinch at all against Michigan. I mean, not one bit. Now, does that change against Georgia? I'm not sure. Those were the two best teams of the last 18 months. We would all agree on that, right? Based on the record and what they've achieved. But Georgia's a little bit different animal, and Georgia is definitely the top dog, definitely, and they're the defending champ. They come from the conference that wins championships. They are the preeminent program in college football currently. I've argued that Alabama's on a run that puts them in that position, and I would still argue that, but like currently what we're seeing right now. And so I think it remains to be seen whether TCU has the freedom that a dog should have in this role, or if they're tight. Listen, for the sake of just a great game, I hope that they play with freedom. I hope that they play like the 97 Broncos as 2 touchdown dogs, to the Packers in Super Bowl 32, right? From a kid from Denver. That was phenomenal watching Elway do the helicopter and all that stuff. So we'll see how it goes. The freedom of the Saints as a dog against the Colts, in that Super Bowl. I think we would all love to see that and see at least Georgia get pushed in one of these national championship games like they were pushed last year by Alabama.
Dunaway was suggesting, put Ollie on your shoulders and measure those goalposts. See, boys, same height they are back in Fort Worth.
I love that. You can go to the Hickory Gym. It's like a museum now.
Yeah,
you can go there and it's like it's basically like a public park. You can go there and shoot baskets. Like you can go into that gym and or dribble around and pass.
Pass 5 times. I've been in Indianapolis a couple times, and I looked that up, and it's actually like an hour outside of Indianapolis. I wanted to go, but that was a haul.
Yeah, we discussed going last year when we were up there for the national championship. Remember when Alabama was part of the national championship, and it's been so long ago. And it was too far outside of town for us to go, or we would have gone to that. It would have been great.
All right, he is Joel Klatt. You guys have loved him coming on each week. We have 2. This is not his final appearance ever, but his final weekly appearance with us this year. We do appreciate that, Klatt. It has been so much fun, and we greatly appreciate the time you've given us.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I love talking about college football. I love talking about it with you guys. And by the way, your listeners, we've had some great interactions on social media, and it's actually been pleasant. Yeah. So I was appreciative of that, and I listen. Happy New Year! Can't wait to be on again, and hopefully we do it again next year.
We have a smart audience. You would admit that, right?
You do, and because they agree with me a lot, and so I'm like, okay, yeah, they're very intelligent.
Klatt, thank you, man. Enjoy the game tonight.
You got it. See you guys. Have a good one,
buddy. Klatt has joined us each week, courtesy of MyBookie. MyBookie.ag code next round. Any deposit of $50 or more, you get that cash bonus. You could use it right away. Bet it once, you could cash it right out. It is that easy. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. Don't forget code next round when you go there. MyBookie.ag code next round. Klatt, like all of our guests, on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.